Hey, what's going on guys? It's Alex here from Simple Mods and welcome back to another video. I hope you all enjoyed my Logic Tribute custom water-cooled system in the Win 925 chassis. I'll link the time-lapse video down in the description if you haven't checked it out already. As in this video, I'm having a bit of a play with the system and seeing how it performs in various RTX supported gaming titles. Please keep in mind that this is not a serious benchmarking video. I'm not going to do any graphs or anything like that. It's just my real-world experience playing these video games and saying if you can comfortably play these games all maxed out with RTX on with the i9 9900KS 5 GHz processor and one or two RTX 2080 Ti graphics cards. And you'll see what I mean by one or two in just a minute. So let's check it out. I'll start out with showing you guys the monitor that I was using. It's the 27-inch AORUS FI27Q. It is a 165Hz IPS 1 millisecond response time 1440p monitor with AMD FreeSync, however also compatible with NVIDIA G-Sync, which I had enabled while playing these video games. The first game I checked out was Control, and I played through the first hour or so with everything pretty much maxed out and all RTX features enabled. I did not enable DLSS as it would reduce the render resolution, and the only options I turned off, which are due to personal preference, are the film grain effect and motion blur. You can see even the MSAA was kept at 4x. The game played beautifully with ray trace reflections, indirect diffuse lighting, contact shadows, and ray trace debris. The game maintained a stable frame rate above 60 FPS at all times and ran very smoothly. In fact, the frame rate was most of the time in between the high 70s to mid 90s. In terms of temps for the CPU and GPU, they were maintained around the mid 50 and mid 40 degrees Celsius respectively, and this was seen across all the games that I checked out. Also, all these results for Control are with the game utilizing only one of the graphics cards in the system only, as unfortunately Control does not support SLI. Next up, I launched Wolfenstein Youngblood, which recently had ray traced reflections added, and while this wasn't as pretty looking as Control, it still played really well as expected with frame rates in the 90s on average with everything maxed out again. I only turned off motion blur, the film grain effect, and the DLSS was disabled as well. Metro Exodus was a game I actually played at launch on a non-RTX graphics card and I actually quite enjoyed it. With the RTX 2080 Ti, I was able to pretty much crank all the settings to the max. Only motion blur was set to low as there was no option for turning it off completely. During cutscenes at the beginning of the game, it would perform in the high 80s to mid 90s, even reaching over 100 FPS. During gameplay in the first part, it seemed to average around 60 with very quick dips into the mid 50s at times. However, I didn't really notice any drops in terms of performance, but I did enable DLSS and this improved the performance by quite a bit, and I was still able to leave the RTX lighting effects on Ultra, and I was now seeing the frame rate average in the mid 80s. This was again, as with Wolfenstein Youngblood and Control, utilizing only one of the graphics cards as these titles don't support SLI. With Call of Duty, I was able to crank everything to the max again with RTX enabled, and in the first couple of levels the frame rates were averaging around 80 and further on in the game even averaging over 100 frames per second in some parts. Definitely very playable maxed out with RTX enabled even with just one RTX 2080 Ti, and I must say the game looks really good with real-time ray traced shadows. Finally, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This was the only RTX game that I checked out which actually supports SLI and scales really well. All settings were maxed out again with RTX enabled, and I was seeing constant frames above 120, even holding steady at 165 FPS in some parts. A really smooth experience and shows how crazy dual RTX 2080 Ti's can be when a game is optimized to use them properly. This is also the only game where I saw temps increase in the high 60s on both the CPU and GPU. However, keep in mind my ambient room temperature of 28 degrees Celsius throughout all this testing, and I'm also running the D5 pump in the water cooling loop at about 40% with fans at similar speeds. It's a quiet system and performs really well even in this very hot Aussie summer weather. Overall, I'm happy with the system and pretty impressed with the performance. However, a bit disappointed that not many games support SLI anymore. So I guess you guys can be the judge if it's actually worth getting dual RTX 2080 Ti graphics cards or in fact any dual graphics card system. Thanks again for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe for more and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.